Who are the natural-born criminals who are bad to the bone? Let's find out, starting with... Number 6, the bad nurse. A Miami-based nurse practitioner, Paulette Padilla, found herself on the wrong side of the law when she was accused of orchestrating an elaborate scam targeting vulnerable elderly people. Her arrest came after an extensive investigation into a phone scam that's plagued South Florida and the wider United States in recent years. The scam targeted elderly individuals, tricking them into sending substantial amounts of money. Detectives had only implicated Padilla in the operation, but the real issue was that she was also faced accusations of contraband trafficking. Law enforcement authorities discovered a shocking 170 pounds of skunky grass concealed in suitcases in her apartment, adding another layer to the case. This phone scam, which is growing in popularity, targets elderly victims and often involves fake emergency situations, such as car accidents or other personal crises. In her case, at least 2 elderly victims have been identified, both of whom were cruelly manipulated into sending her substantial amounts of money. One of the victims, an 86-year-old woman from Chicago, was scammed into wiring $20,000 after receiving a frantic call telling her about a family member's supposed traffic accident. Although her family reported the incident to Bank of America, who initiated an investigation, the damage was done. $20,000 had already been wired to her bank account. When asked about the fraudulent transaction, Padilla was totally indifferent, actually asking how that was her problem. That kind of heartless response really shows the lack of empathy shown in these predatory schemes. Further investigation revealed that Padilla had sent large amounts of money to her mother and an undisclosed associate while also making cash withdrawals from a Bank of America ATM. Additional evidence on her phone pointed to another victim, this time an elderly woman from New York who had mailed $22,000 to Padilla and her alleged accomplices. Padilla, who appeared to lead a respectable life as a healthcare professional, was arrested and charged with organized scheme to defraud, counts of trafficking and possession of substances with the purpose of trafficking. It may just be us, but we think she's a little toxic. Hey-o! Number 5, chasing status. A couple of fraudsters lived like high-rolling Premier League soccer players through a SIM swap scam that made them nearly £500,000. Desmond, Amoako, and Sami, Ebraheem had orchestrated hundreds of SIM swaps in which they replaced victims' SIM cards, gaining control over their mobile phone numbers. The scam allowed them to intercept text messages containing sensitive information, such as security codes from banks and card companies, which they used to make online purchases and bank transfers. Amoako's extravagance knew no bounds, as he spent tons of money at upscale fashion outlets like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, dined in luxury restaurants across London, and even rented a luxury apartment. He drove a fleet of high-end vehicles, including a Range Rover, Porsche, and Bentley. Amoako also had a massive amount of shoes, because this guy's a sneakerhead. This opulent lifestyle came to an end when he was arrested at a branch of Metro Bank with a mobile phone that had facilitated more than 100 SIM swaps. Ebraheem, on the other hand, was caught in an apartment where he had concealed mobile phones and laptops containing personal and financial data belonging to over 1,500 people. In this case, both culprits were prosecuted, with Amoako being sentenced to 4 years for conspiracy to defraud, money laundering, and possession of articles for use in fraud. Ebraheem received a sentence of 2 years and 4 months for conspiracy to defraud and money laundering. Number 4, Scammy Bones. David Bloom, infamous for being the Wall Street whiz kid who scammed millions from investors in the 1980s, was arrested in Los Angeles 35 years after serving time for his earlier scams. Bloom faced charges related to grand theft and fraud. Bloom, who was only 23 when he was first jailed in 1988, gained notoriety for defrauding over 140 clients by promising them riches through stock market investments. His victims included even his own grandmother, the Sultan of Brunei, the world's wealthiest man at the time, and worst of all, Bill Cosby. Just kidding, Bill Cosby is garbage. In this latest round of alleged scams, Bloom portrayed himself as a well-connected man with influential friends, promising his victims riches through stocks that hadn't gone public yet. Some of his claims included connections to Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos and Whole Foods magnate A.C. Gallo. Among his victims was reality TV star Caroline D'Amour, who, like many others, was taken in by Bloom's elaborate ruse. D'Amour was struggling to keep her company afloat during the pandemic when she cried crossed paths with Bloom, who befriended her at her apartment complex's first-floor pool. He convinced her that he could introduce her to influential figures who would help her business, making grandiose claims about backing from Whole Foods for her organic pasta sauce company. Despite initial skepticism, Damore fell for Bloom's promises when she believed that he had set up a meeting with Whole Foods' AC Gallo. Additionally, Bloom convinced her to invest $35,000 in Soho house shares, promising an $850,000 return. It was only after a fruitless trip to Texas, where she was supposed to meet the Whole Foods boss, that Damore realized the truth about Bloom's history of fraud. Bloom's rearrest has sparked a public outcry, with more alleged victims, like life coach Sean Kushner, coming forward to share their experiences. Many have demanded justice, protesting outside the district attorney's office. Damore has been vocal about her ordeal, urging other victims not to be ashamed and to report their losses. Bloom had better watch out for all those legions of Damore fans coming for him. We're sure there's got to be at least one, right? Number 3. Trust me, I'm a cop and a lawyer. Stephen Davey from Liverpool conned 3 vulnerable women, who isn't named since the case is ongoing at the time of this video, out of thousands of pounds by impersonating a police officer and a lawyer. Davey exploited their trust and stole nearly 8,500 pounds. Davey introduced himself to his first victim while visiting a sports bar in Liverpool. Presenting himself as Stephen Burns, he said he was a police officer, offender manager, and probation worker, and developed a close relationship with the woman over several months. To borrow money from her, he claimed he was buying a house for the two of them to live in. The woman asked for Davey's help for a friend in a family court case after being scared of her husband, since he claimed a law enforcement background. Davey led the woman to believe he had a friend named Simon Davey, a family lawyer who could provide legal representation. He then charged the woman for a private investigator to follow her ex-husband that he never hired, pocketing the fee. Davey manipulated the woman into not even going to court by saying that he would represent them. Davey then went to tell the woman she had been granted full custody of their children and compensation when this was totally untrue. He even produced fake legal documents and emails related to the ex-husband's parental rights. Davey sent one victim fake screenshots saying they were from the police. He claimed that law enforcement was involved in an operation to arrest one victim's ex-husband on multiple charges. Davey also forged an email from the chief of police saying that the man was about to be arrested. Davey's manipulation extended to even convincing another victim to pay for private health costs by claiming he feared he had cancer and that a National Health Services scan would take too long. Davey's shady activities were finally exposed when staff at a Liverpool hotel where he was staying grew suspicious and Googled him. They found news articles about his previous cons and contacted the police. A search of his hotel room led to the recovery of items used in his deceptions, including police lanyards and documents the women had provided to him. During his sentencing, the judge talked a lot about the harm he caused to the children involved. Davey's extensive criminal record, including 94 offenses and 17 convictions, started in 1987, was a clear indicator of his status as a dishonest fraudster, which is a polite way of saying this guy is total garbage. He received a 4-year prison sentence with a 10-year restraining order that prohibits him from contacting the victims or going to their addresses, including the Toon Hotel in Castle Street, the hotel in Liverpool where he lived. And really, it's bad enough that he was scamming people in general, but to actually scam a mother fighting for her kids in a stressful situation? What an awful human. Number 2. Sabbat Stories. A pattern of scams landed Florida woman, of course she's from Florida, Laura DeKaiser, in hot water once again. DeKaiser, who was already on probation for possession, used a series of sob stories to swindle people and a local business out of more than $10,000. Her scam involved manipulating her victims with made-up stories and convincing them to cash counterfeit checks through their bank account. She earned herself some charges of grand theft, fraud, and a violation of her probation. One of her targeted victims was the local dealership Gary Yeoman's Honda, where she managed to steal nearly $11,000. Daytona Beach police began their investigation after an alert Gary Yeoman's employee noticed suspicious checks, presumably intended for the dealership, being cashed at various banks, including Bank of America, Chase Morgan, and Wells Fargo. The Kaiser's cons extended beyond the dealership to involve several other people, 7 of whom were identified and contacted by police. Her strategy involved intercepting her victims on their way to the bank and weaving elaborate stories that led to money monetary losses. At one point, De Keyser approached a woman at Wells Fargo Bank explaining that she had been robbed and only had a check. She begged the woman to deposit the fake check into her account, successfully withdrawing $912.54. A second victim approached by De Keyser later that day at the same Wells Fargo fell victim to a similar story, losing $1,350. De Keyser's criminal history paints a pattern of scams and deception. While her current charges include fraud and grand theft, her previous possession convictions really show that all this woman cares about is scamming. She's a hard-working criminal who operates without remorse or conscience. Too bad she didn't put all that scammer energy into something less criminal, like just having a job. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here for our past release about the corrupt African family. Number 1, the final boss of scamming. Jeremy Wilson, a serial con artist who adopted more than 27 aliases to conduct an extensive history of financial fraud, was sentenced to 7 to 14 years in prison. His crimes involved pretending to be a former wounded Army veteran to secure a BMW SUV lease and rent a luxury apartment. Wilson's criminal activities date back to the early 1990s, with a rap sheet spanning several states, including California, Montana, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. His lengthy history of being a scammer culminated in his most recent scam, which he attempted in both New York and Massachusetts. In New York, Wilson posed as a U.S. Army veteran, claiming to have 2 Purple Hearts, and presented himself as a doctor with 2 PhDs from MIT, adopting the alias Jeremiah Asimov Beckingham. With this fake identity, he got himself a luxurious $5,000 a month apartment in the financial district, leveraging forged documents and checks. In Boston, he managed to lease a $55,000 BMW SUV with similar tactics. The charges against Wilson in New York included forgery, possession of stolen property, and possession of a forged instrument. In addition to his criminal activities in New York, he was also facing larceny and check fraud charges in Massachusetts. However, he had to face trial in New York before being tried in Massachusetts. During the trial, Wilson expressed his confusion about fixing his situation and admitted to running and hiding from the consequences of his actions throughout his adult life. Despite his extensive criminal record, Wilson appeared unfazed by his crimes. The prosecutor provided insight into Wilson's history, emphasizing that he had been convicted of at least 8 felonies in different states. Wilson posed as an airline executive, an MIT student, an Army veteran, and even a member of an actors union in various schemes. The prosecutor presented Wilson as a serial con artist who had spent his entire adult life devoted to fraud. Throughout the trial, the defense claimed that it wasn't illegal for Wilson to adopt an alias, comparing it to a stage name used by public figures like Jay-Z or Hulk Hogan, which we're pretty sure wasn't the issue Wilson was in court for. This guy is such a scammer, the government wasn't quite sure if his birth certificate was actually to be trusted, so they just charged him under Jeremy Wilson, despite supposedly being born Jeremy Clark Erskine. Crazy thing is that Wilson was so into conning people that his first defense attorney withdrew from the case because he was worried he was being conned as well. Not exactly a good indicator that this guy was going to be getting away with anything this time. It all starts with Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo, the second president of Equatorial Guinea, who's held the position for more than 40 years. During his reign, most citizens of this oil-rich nation have continued to live in extreme poverty. That doesn't apply to the president's son, however. Teodoro Nguema Obiang built a lavish lifestyle for himself, even though nobody really knows where he's getting all of his money. In fact, his official government position as forestry and agriculture minister was reportedly paying just $6,500 per month. At the same time, he dropped a cool $30 million on a California mansion in 2006. And that's not even close to the end of his extravagant spending. He also paid vast sums for luxurious homes in South Africa, Argentina, England, and France. Naturally, he felt the need to travel in style too. Teodorin reportedly spent about $1.5 million on a pair of Bentleys in one weekend. He also added a couple of lightning-fast Lamborghinis to his collection, a Bugatti, and an Aston Martin. Among his other outlandish purchases was a Gulfstream jet that cost about $35 million and a huge art collection valued at about $20 million. The third of 10 brothers, Teodoro and his family, moved to Equatorial Guinea from their home in Gabon so that his parents could avoid paying taxes in that country. After his mother died, his father remarried and he went off to college where he majored in labor administration. His uncle, Francisco Macias Nguema, Alabama, was named the nation's first president. He gave Teodoro several influential positions within the government. His family's decision to move to another country to evade taxes might have been a red flag. However, that was nothing compared to the string of corruption and violence that followed Teodoro once he got a taste of power. Joining the military and training in Spain, Teodoro rose through the ranks and ultimately became a lieutenant. He went on to lead the National Guard. He also became the governor of Bioko, an island province off Africa's west coast. His most infamous position was probably as the head of Black Beach Prison, which gained a troubling reputation for grossly mistreating its prisoners. Reports showed that inmates were denied access to medical treatment and proper nutrition despite international rules set by the United Nations. Teodoro continued his rise to prominence in Equatorial Guinea while his uncle held the title of president throughout the 1970s. His various governmental positions weren't enough. He led a violent coup that allowed him to take over as the country's authoritarian leader in 1979. His uncle was sentenced to death, but the nation's citizens were afraid of his supposed magical powers. To carry out the sentence, officials had to call help from neighboring Morocco. At first, many people believed the new president would be a positive change after his uncle's brutal reign. Teodoro promised a new beginning for the troubled nation upon taking office by force. He stopped the practice of forced labor that had become commonplace under his uncle's regime, and even released those being held as political prisoners. Of course, he failed to offer any apologies or explanations for the violence and terror he caused during the same period. He's ruled with an iron fist in the decades since, demanding that he be treated more like a god than a president. In fact, he declared in 1993 that he should be revered as a deity. Years later, one state-run media outlet described him as the country's god. They asserted that he had the authority to get rid of anyone he wanted without fearing punishment. Equatorial Guinea's status as an oil-rich nation cemented Teodoro's power on the world stage. He embraced the position as a god on earth and has faced accusations of corruption, human rights abuses, and various atrocities. You'd think an oil-rich nation would have overwhelming benefits for its people. On paper, it certainly looks that way. After all, the nation's gross domestic product per capita is among the highest in the world. But that doesn't translate into wealth for individual citizens. Instead, most of the money goes into the pockets of the president and his family members, specifically his son. In response to the massive oil boom, Teodoro discovered that he could make a ton of money by controlling who got a drilling contract. For that reason, most of the meaningful contracts went to firms led by his family members. As a result of the president's corruption, his nation's wealth is concentrated in one place. Even though Equatorial Guinea has the highest per capita income in Africa, reports showed that roughly 7 in 10 citizens still live in severe poverty and can't obtain the basic necessities of life. Most people living in the nation don't even have clean drinking water. Furthermore, roughly 2 out of every 10 children don't live past their 5th birthday. Those who are fortunate enough to make it to adulthood are forced to live with the consequences of poor nutrition and inadequate educational system. Teodoro and his family got richer as his countrymen suffered at the hands of his corruption. According to one estimate, the president was worth $600 million, making him one of the wealthiest political leaders. Much of that wealth dates back to a decision he made in 2003 to take over the national bank. He said it was part of an effort to stop corruption by other officials, but it became clear to his critics that he was only interested in finding new ways to demonstrate his own corruption. He reportedly put $500 million into dozens of family-controlled U.S. bank accounts. Several years later, he faced new accusations of fraud based on complaints that he used public money for a series of extravagant private purchases. This included several expensive homes and cars that his son bought for himself. By 2010, the watchdog group Transparency International included Equatorial Guinea in its list of the 12 most corrupt countries in the world. Officials believe the family took in billions of dollars in oil-related revenue without properly reporting that income. The investigation by authorities in Spain, France, and the U.S. ultimately led to the seizure of many assets. That doesn't mean that Teodoro and his kin have learned their lessons. A disproportionate amount of public money is still going toward the upkeep of presidential residences. At the same time, the citizens of Equatorial Guinea continue to suffer in poverty. When you're rich beyond your wildest dreams, almost nothing is off limits. That's what Teodoran learned as he spent millions of dollars on luxuries and hobbies while his father served as president. Many of these purchases were pretty standard for the ultra-wealthy, like cars, homes, artwork, and a jet. However, a few of his expenditures were unique and reflected his personal passions. Among the obvious examples was his infatuation with Michael Jackson. When the pop star died in 2009, Teodoran jumped at the chance to purchase a variety of personal items from the singer's estate. feet. Theodorin idolized Michael Jackson and believed that spending money on memorabilia might give his wealth an air of legitimacy as his family continued to face accusations of corruption. In the end, Theodorin achieved the distinction of becoming the world's foremost collector of items related to the King of Pop. Among the most valuable items that he added to his collection was Jackson's bejeweled glove during the tour for his Bad album and the distinctive jacket he wore while touring for the Thriller album. The memorabilia was said to be worth more than $1 million. Theodorin's eclectic tastes and limitless wealth make him feel like a superhero. Or maybe he considered himself more of an international man of mystery. Both of these identities were reflected in his lavish spending habits. In addition to his love of Michael Jackson, he was also obsessed with Batman and James Bond. He regularly posted social media images of himself alongside various women and a collection of expensive personal items. One of his vehicles was customized to resemble the Batmobile. He also showed off a collection of specialized vehicles, like a submarine, as part of a lifestyle that more closely resembled 007 than the son of an African president. As citizens starved and succumbed to preventable diseases, Theodorin grew more eager to spend his money and pose for Instagram. Of course, he was frequently accused of corruption, but refused to acknowledge or apologize for any of his supposed misdeeds. In fact, he claimed that his family should be protected from any consequences because of a concept known as diplomatic immunity. Investigators around the world disagreed, though, and they looked deeper into allegations of bribery and extortion. In 2012, 4 international organizations set up a meeting with the president to discuss ways to address these troubling claims. They hoped to reform the government of Equatorial Guinea and keep Teodoro's corruption in check. About 7 years later, authorities from Switzerland seized 25 luxury cars and sold them at auction for a combined $27 million. That was the final step in a decade-long probe led by investigators from several nations. Other seized property included an extensive wine collection. Theodorin was convicted by a French court of a money laundering scheme that included embezzling roughly $100 million. However, he appealed that decision, and prosecutors in Switzerland ultimately dropped their charges. It appeared that authorities had finally caught up with the president's family, and they would face some serious consequences. However, many critics say the property seized and sold at auction was not enough. Even Theodorin's conviction in Paris was relatively insignificant considering the amount of money he and his family had embezzled at the expense of their country's citizens. Although he denied the charges, a court found him guilty, took control of property that he owned in France. As for the sentence, however, Theodorin was ordered to pay a $35 million fine and received a 3-year prison sentence that was ultimately suspended. He never spent a day behind bars and only gave up a fraction of his extravagant assets. To the people of Equatorial Guinea, Theodorin got away with a slap on the wrist. The U.S. investigation ended in 2014, and Theodorin was ordered to turn over about $30 million in assets. Still, that was less than half of what prosecutors hoped to get. Adding insult to injury, he was allowed to keep many of his most prized possessions, including his Gulfstream jet and his beloved Michael Jackson memorabilia. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section who you find more annoying, Logan Paul or Dylan Dennis.